Hello, one and all, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I'm your host, Connor Reeves. With me, as always, is Phil McKenzie.
I'm also here.
Wow. Oh my god, I heard even the beginning of the word I heard that little glottal sound at the start of the word. This is unprecedented. Hopefully that's not the only small, subtle sounds that you are hearing today, as there is a 4th of July parade happening outside. For some reason, not one going on in Phil's neighborhood. I don't know. We're going to be looking into that later. But if you happen...
The colonies will come back under their rightful rulers one day, Connor.
It'd be really funny if you guys had an anti-4th of July parade. You just had a display of military force going down the street as like a sort of threat to the colonies. So yeah, if you happen to hear booming bass and like a Bruno Mars song and then like a horn section and then a drum line and then 4 more iterations of each of these things, that is the explanation. Otherwise, we have an awful lot of awfully good stuff to get to on today's episode. It is UFC 290, and that means Alexander Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez for the featherweight championship. It also means Brandon Moreno versus Alexandre Pantoja for the flyweight championship, and that is, I keep forgetting, that is Moreno Pantoja 2?
3.
Is it 2?
I mean, it's 2 officially, yeah, because
okay.
The first one is technically an exhibition bout, right?
Right, okay. So technically 2, but really it's their 3rd fight, a series in which Moreno has yet to win. And so that's very interesting because Moreno has, well, at least most of the time, looked great as a champion. And here comes a little wild man who has so far proven to be his nemesis. So that should be a good title fight as well. And then, of course, the real main event of the card, fan favorite Bobby Knuckles is taking on the one, the only African fighter in the UFC, Dricus du Plessis. In what should be an absolutely absurd clash of very, very different styles. So that's a lot of good stuff. We're hopefully going to squeeze out a little bonus covering some of the undercard, including fights like Jalen Turner, Dan Hooker, and Robbie Lawler, Nico Price, and Jack Della Maddalena versus a guy. Love that UFC matchmaking, but you can't complain about this main card at all. It is 4 beautiful fights, and we're going to talk about the first of them right now. Volkanovski, Rodriguez, champion versus technically interim champion. Totally unclear why they even decided to do that. But it's time. It's a good fight. What do you make of it, Phil?
It's one of those ones where I think you probably have to pick Volkanovski.
But of course.
Not to spoil anything, because he is like a better, more 3-dimensional fighter and all that kind of stuff. But it's also one of the ones where you should absolutely feel extremely worried.
Yeah.
For like a number of reasons. Pretty much all of them physical.
Yeah, pretty much. That is exactly how I do feel. That there are going to be a bunch of ways we're going to break this matchup down, all of which seem to point to Volkanovski just being, well, you know, he's the best fighter in the world. So, like, what do you want? We're going to be praising him. We're going to be talking about all his technical brilliancies, et cetera, et cetera. But, man, I have had some sharp reminders recently. They should be unnecessary at this point, but still, sharp reminders that athleticism fucking counts. That technique and strategy, all of these things really are secondary to physicality because it is a physical sport. Perhaps more so than any other, it is one person's raw physicality smashed into another's. And, yeah. I mean, did you see Michael Morales, Max Griffin last weekend? No, why wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you did? Wow.
Yep.
Right? Like, an absolute mess, Michael Morales. He has a good jab and nothing else. And he can cheat his way through a fight with a solid, experienced fighter in Max Griffin. Just doesn't matter.
Not even an unathletic one.
No, he's just way too good physically, and it just completely changes things. Now, part of the reason we love Volkanovski so much is that he is, like Jose Aldo before him, a truly superior athlete who also has rock-solid technique. But you still get the feeling that Rodriguez is the athlete in this matchup. It's perhaps because he wears it on his sleeve more. Like, it's more essential to his game working or not working in some ways.
Yeah, that is for sure. Like, Alexander Volkanovski, if he wasn't a great athlete, would still be a, like, nerd fan favorite fighter.
Right.
He would be one of these guys where people look to him and they are like, man, I love all the stuff he does. And it's just a shame he, got blown out by Josh Emmett or something.
Just a shame he was cursed by God.
Yeah. But yeah, Yair Rodriguez without his athleticism would be rubbish. Yeah, it's also the fact that, like, Volkanovski is just an uncommonly small featherweight. Rodriguez is huge. He's like perfectly. He's not just one of the greatest athletes we've ever seen in the UFC. I feel fairly comfortable saying that. In terms of, he ticks pretty much every single box.
Yeah.
In terms of, like, strength, durability,
speed, power,
cardio, like, everything.
Yep.
Yeah, he's just exactly the right size to be huge for his weight class, but still be able to make it every single time. Yeah, Volkanovski is uncommonly small. Like, most of the champions are the big, tall guys who can light people up from range and so on. And we've talked about this a bunch.
Or they're at least average sized for their division. Volkanovski he has not. I'm writing about him right now, so I looked at this particularly. He has not fought somebody who is his height since Chad Mendes in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else has been significantly taller than him. In fact, I was shocked when Wikipedia listed Brian Ortega as merely 2 inches taller. That can't be right.
That cannot be right.
I looked at him in the cage, and he looked at least 3 inches taller. Everyone else, though, like Max Holloway is a full 4 inches taller. Both Makhachev and Holloway is a full 5 inches taller, as will Rodriguez be. Makhachev was 4 inches taller. Everyone is bigger than Alexander Volkanovski, which I suppose should be some comfort if you're concerned about the size disparity in this fight, because Volkanovski is out there masterfully managing the distance against these much taller opponents every time. But there is something extra flashy scary about Yair Rodriguez that makes the prospect of having to deal with him for any amount of time at range quite a bit scarier, I think.
I mean, I think the main problem is that you have to treat him like Edson Barboza.
Yeah.
You have to be all the way in, or you basically just have to be somewhere where he can't hit you, because he kicks really hard, he's really creative with it. You can obviously counterpunch him when he's, because he's not offensively good.
Yeah. But
it's the question of, like, is this counterpunch going to be worth it? Because he's got a disgusting chin to go with everything else. Like, yeah. I mean, this is the problem with Rodriguez as a fighter, is that, Barboza as a comparative example was someone that you could smash into the cage and then sort of crush. And you could, with difficulty, assuming like a certain level of physicality, sort of box him out of the fight and not have to deal with the explosive violence and so on, because he was more fragile than Yair, and he just wasn't, as physically strong for his division. The issue with Yair is that it seems to be almost impossible to get out of a fight with him, at least nowadays, without taking significant damage. Because he's now got enough of a takedown, defense, and scrambling game, combined with his absurd athleticism to be able to get up out of takedowns. And yeah, he just throws wild offense all the time. Doesn't particularly mind what's coming back at him. it's all very dangerous, very fast, and very difficult to predict.
Yeah, and he has gotten better. I mean, that can't be ignored either. Like we're gonna have to talk about the disparity in technique. Volkanovski is by and large the much cleaner fighter. These things don't exist in a vacuum either. I mean, I think we can all agree Volkanovski's striking looked a lot sloppier against Islam Makhachev.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was hyper focused on the wrestling and also seemed to think he could just sort of pressure and bowl Makhachev over. That was not true, and Makhachev had focused so much on his striking in preparation that he was largely able to outstrike Volkanovski at points. So, you know, these aren't video game characters. Context changes how these skills appear. But anyway, for all the technical gap that we will be talking about here, Rodriguez has gotten better in the way that all fighters get better if they stick around long enough. In that his game, he has retooled all the little bits and pieces of his game to make better use of his crazy athletic style. He is much more defensively aware than he used to be, if not a great defensive fighter still. The way he uses his footwork, the way that he exits exchanges with punches has definitely improved. And much like we were talking about with another freak athlete in Macy Barber, who is different, but still not on like the total level of athletic superiority of a guy like Yair Rodriguez. We talked about her fight with Amanda Hebush and how even if she was getting hit, she seemed a lot more aware that shots would be coming back at her at the ends of striking sequences, and therefore much readier to deal with that, whether it meant rolling the power of the strike off or coming back with counters or frequently resetting and not getting hit at all. Yair has improved in that way as well. That his resets might be messy. You can watch that Max Holloway fight and be like, man, he is just horribly out of position every time he leaves the pocket. But he didn't get hit on the exits nearly as much as I think he would have a couple years earlier.
Yeah.
He's gotten a lot savvier. He has gained experience, and he looks like a more experienced fighter than he used to. He makes better decisions, and just sort of feels the fight, feels the rhythm of the exchanges in a way he didn't used to.
Yeah, and also he can punch now.
That speed means power.
He can just throw semi-committal punches now, basically, and straight punches.
Yeah.
Whilst looking to see what his opponent is doing, to see if they, come back with, to see if they're trying to counter him, or to see if he can follow up with a kick. He's happy to just throw straight punches in the pocket. Again, like we were talking about with Mackenzie Dern. It's not like there's much of a defensive process behind this, but the improvement of it as a approach compared to his old style of just kick them a bunch. If they get in close, just throw like a tornado of hooks at them,
mm-hmm.
or run away. That was sort of early Yair. It just makes a huge difference because he's just throwing out straight strikes, and he got into a bunch of exchanges with Max Holloway, and I think Max was slightly sort of shocked that Yair wasn't being driven out of the pocket in a way that he might have, might have been previously. I mean, admittedly, Yair did get driven out of the pocket a bunch. I mean, like I said, he was still getting punched a lot, but
yeah,
I mean, that was a far more brutal, far tougher fight for Max than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I think we were all just as surprised as Max. Yeah, throwing much tighter combinations, more combinations in general, but much tighter, much straighter, and combining that with the newfound sort of defensive awareness. Again, if not great defensive technique, there's a certain level of athleticism at which right idea, wrong execution can be extremely effective. Right? Like, you can look at Manny Pacquiao, even the version that was completely fine-tuned by Freddie Roach in his prime was not a great technician across the board. He had a lot of very specific moves that worked because he was Manny Pacquiao. He is a freak athlete. And he's Manny Pacquiao. So, like, you can't say that shit doesn't work. And yeah, that all of this is a concern. I think the biggest concern by far is the kicking game of Yair Rodriguez. Because, Volkanovski is a master at controlling distance, a master at picking people apart, even from long range, even when they're much larger than him. A lot of that comes down to his kicking game. He's got a great jab, he's got great footwork, et cetera, but Volkanovski is a low kicking machine. Especially the inside low kick, he uses that better than pretty much anyone else in the sport, that specific technique. I think he's put up a few records, in fact, in various fights of like highest or second highest number of low kicks thrown in a title fight. You can't ignore the fact that against pretty much every opponent he's faced, Volkanovski has had the kicking advantage. He has been the more willing and more technical and precise kicker. And Yair Rodriguez loves to kick people. That is, I think, the first layer of his offense. It's the first thing he learned to do well. And it absolutely destroyed Josh Emmett. There were a lot of other things going on in that fight, but that left body kick and the left high kick, which then allowed him to set up and land a few spinning shots and things like flying knees, all of these dynamic leg strikes from long range, they're super powerful and super fast, and you also can't overlook the fact that one of the most effective tactics that Islam Makhachev used against Volkanovski was the left body kick. Mm-hmm. He landed it a lot. And Max Holloway also caught Volkanovski with a high kick, getting him to duck into it after threatening him with punches. Those, I think, are very concerning strikes for the little short guy in Volkanovski. Like, however brilliantly he navigates range as the smaller man, there is a reason why height and reach are considered just sort of passive advantages. Yair is going to be able to hit him at a range where Volkanovski will have to do extra work to be able to land back. As long as he is at that distance, he is going to have to deal with the kicks, and that means, at the very least, probably blocking a bunch of them, which even that can do a lot of damage with somebody as fast and powerful as Yair. And that body kick, head kick switch up, I think, should be especially concerning. Like, I don't know. You can just see it in your mind, can't you? That, like,
yeah,
he could just KO Volkanovski with a head kick, or just get him out of there with a body kick. He's just going to have a lot of time and opportunities to land these, unless Volkanovski is pressuring him like mad, which he doesn't tend to do a lot these days, or holding him down or smashing him up against the fence. So this brings me to my point, which is I think Volkanovski is really going to need his wrestling in this fight. I think the takedown defense has improved for Rodriguez, but it is still pretty much his largest weakness. Combined with his willingness to fight off of his back, like, that has improved as well. But then you look at that Josh Emmett fight, and he finished him from his back. Like, he decided to play guard, and he was very aggressive. He used his guard in, I think, the only viable way anyone can, but he still opted to play guard. And that is a strategic opportunity for a guy like Volkanovski that I think he would be absolutely insane to pass up.
I think the main thing about Volkanovski, one of the things that makes him such a great fighter, is that you can obviously, like, take broad approaches from him that he can use in, like, any fight as he sees fit, and you can actually have some level of comfort that he might actually do it.
Yeah,
you know, if there's a functional approach to win a fight, you can be like, oh, yeah, I think Alexander Volkanovski will probably actually do the right thing here.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go all the way back to sort of classic Volkanovski, who was the like wrestling and ground and pound guy, and that seems like a good choice this time.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could, you can go for sort of careful sort of outside low kicker Volkanovski, and you're like, that one doesn't seem so great.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can have sort of pocket boxer Volkanovski, and you can be like, yeah, you can do that sometimes. Yeah, I think that Makhachev fight, obviously his striking looked worse, but his grappling looked better than most people thought it would, both in terms of the defensive wrestling, but also the offensive wrestling.
Yeah,
I mean,
there came a point in that fight. Go on.
Yeah, it was the fact that the fight ended with him, in top position on Islam Makhachev.
Yeah. We just like in the Holloway Rodriguez fight, we were not the only people, us watching, who were surprised by the dynamics in this one. Like, I think Volkanovski came in with the rational understanding that, like, I got to pressure this guy and out-punch him, and I have to really be focused on the wrestling. Obviously, these are our two advantages. And there was a weird flip where Islam was surprisingly effective with his striking. And there came a point like halfway through the fight where Alex seemed to realize, I think I can out-wrestle this guy. And he was kind of right. I think he felt it over time in the tie-ups. He's like, wait a minute, like this guy is not actually much stronger than me. And, yeah, perhaps like his entire game is not really built around stopping people from taking him down. And he actually started offensively out-wrestling Makhachev. Yeah, it is the well-roundedness of Volkanovski. He is a true all-terrain fighter in a way that very, very few fighters in MMA really are. And a great game planner. So, yeah, you assume that he is going to recognize that. And I think he's going to get his opportunities. I mean, it may have been off of like a weird flying knee that Josh Emmett got Yair Rodriguez down. But, like, those opportunities are going to arise. You think Yair's going to not throw crazy things that give his opponent opportunities to take him down? He would be a broken man if he tried to do that. He's not that flexible strategically to, like, strip that whole thing out of his game. And yeah, so I don't know. I mean, do you expect Volkanovski to try to pressure Yair here and try to force him up against the fence?
Expect it, not in a like super aggressive way, but yeah, sure. I mean, in terms of the distance that he holds, I don't expect him to counterpunch. Here, I mean, not in a. I don't expect him to be drawing him onto shots.
Yeah,
and like moving backwards or anything like that, because I think that would be stupid.
It seems very risky.
Yeah, I mean, he should be using Volkanovski things. He should be basically going to just outside Yair's range, and then just fainting him a whole bunch until he can figure out a way to move in. That seems like it's a perfectly plausible approach for Volkanovski to take. So think stuff like those shifting combinations he was using against Makhachev, probably honestly not as bad to go for. It was one of the things I actually found myself thinking when I was watching the Makhachev fight. I was just like, a lot of this would work really well on Yair Rodriguez.
Yeah.
Like, the stuff you've been training on for this fight, just the work, going back to your grappling and working on it and so on. I think all of this would like work pretty well on Yair. So yeah, I think he just needs to push him backwards with feints essentially until his back is to the cage. And I don't think Yair is kind of strategically directionally aimless enough that will probably work.
Yeah.
My other point is thinking about the kicking dynamic, and I am wondering, like, the thing about Yair is that, again, I don't really know if he has a plan when he's going into his fight, other than, like, let's just flow and do cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And wonder what happened, like, the other thing is, like, everyone that he's fought has so much conceded like the kicking game to him.
Yeah.
So how much is this going to be like Gaethje Barboza, where like someone comes up to him and starts low kicking him, and he's like, "What's this?"
I think that's certainly possible. Yeah.
This guy can kick me too. Like more than that, if his kicking game is going to be largely his kicking game is going to be largely like, you know, Yair stuff, which is basically the body kick and then a whole bunch of crazy stuff. How much is like Volk going to be able to chip away with him with just like inside low kicks? Yair is definitely like he's a real rear foot kicker. Everything he throws is pretty much, or you know, he stance switches a lot, but he was always bracing on his front foot to throw his rear foot.
Yeah.
He's not a front foot kicker at all, unlike Volkanovski.
He will do it some, but yeah, his power kicks, his favorite kicks, absolutely come off the back leg.
Yeah. So I do find myself wondering whether, you know, over the course of time, this fight, like Volkanovski might essentially force him out of the close stance match. I think he just keeps picking away at his lead leg, orthodox, and jabbing him and so on. I think Yair is probably going to drift out of orthodox and just go back to kind of spamming the body kick from southpaw as more and more over the course of the fight.
I'm kind of expecting Yair to come in doing that, to be honest. I mean, your point about not knowing whether he ever has a plan stands, but I think if he does any game planning whatsoever, he'll probably think, I'll be further away if I'm southpaw, and I'm going to have that big left kick. If anyone on his team has watched any footage, they will have seen how well that worked for Makhachev. And he certainly did it a bunch against Emmett. Like I think it's a pretty natural decision to make against a little stocky guy you have the kicking advantage, that you just go southpaw and just blast huge southpaw kicks at him. So I'm kind of thinking that might be there from the start, and it wouldn't be a bad idea for Yair. You know, there's also the fact with Yair, because he's so fast and agile, it's actually not as easy to pressure him out of his kicking game as you would expect. This is another concern for me. Like, against, you know, pressure is still a great antidote to kicks. It just makes it a lot harder to set them up. And it also means that you're going to be able to counter them a lot more effectively when they are thrown. Right? So one way or another, you're finding a way to sort of take the kicks out of the equation. But Volkanovski's like slow, methodical pressure, he is still going to have to wade through that range where this incredibly light-footed, quick, long striker will be able to unload kicks on him. I don't know. It's just concerning. It's just more concerning than I think than it would have been either before Volkanovski's fight with Makhachev or before Yair's last few fights, including that fight with Max. That like
100%.
This guy is...
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I do find myself thinking about is that stat that whoever came up with it. It wasn't Zayn, was it?
Zayn hasn't come up with anything in his life.
Fuck him. Yeah.
I don't think so.
Even if it was, screw him. The one about, you know, UFC fighters over 35 in title fights under middleweight. And it was like...
That was Zayn, yeah.
So there was something like 28-2.
Yeah.
The time when he wrote it, and it's probably less now. Because we've had like, I think it's Henry Cejudo, right?
Yeah.
And Alexander Volkanovski is 34 years old, and he's going to be 35 in September.
Yep.
So he bucks a lot of trends in like who he is as a fighter. We've already kind of talked about that with the stature and all that kind of stuff. This is kind of another one that he's going to have to buck fairly soon. It's just like other time in an incredibly competitive division, and one where he isn't insulated from like fighting like a lot, like say people in lightweight have been. I mean, yeah, I mean, I was thinking, like, you know, Holloway, I think, looks, to me, less physically overwhelming than he used to. Volkanovski, as mentioned, is, you know, coming up for his mid-30s. Mm-hmm. There is a non-zero chance that, like, 2 years from now, either Volk or Holloway are in the title conversation anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, they're in the title conversation in the way that, like, Poirier and Gaethje kind of sure, yeah, kind of way are.
Right.
That, you know, both of those fighters could suddenly shockingly age out of the division. They are both at that point. Max because of the insane amounts of damage he's absorbed, and Volkanovski because he's just old.
Yeah. His style may be less dependent on athleticism than Yair's, but he is still as dependent on his physicality as anyone in the top 5 of such a deep division.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I mean, there's literally just no way of insulating yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, you can't fight someone like Yair without being extremely athletic. It's just not possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm still going to pick Volkanovski.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to, but, like, it's a very, very scary fight.
It is. Yeah, I have to pick him. I need to see somebody like Yair beat him. I mean, I think ultimately it comes down to sort of vaguely assuming he's going to game plan and come up with some good answers. Some of them probably the ones that we've talked about here. It also, I think, comes down to the fact that the other thing about Volkanovski is that, like, he is a true champion. He simply refuses to lose. Mm-hmm. Even the fights that he's lost, you can see him in there refusing to lose the entire time. And, like, this came in very handy when, for example, Brian Ortega stuck him in 2 nasty deep submissions within a space of, like, 45 seconds. And he just refused to get submitted. It was like when Demetrius Johnson got caught in the guillotine by Joe Benavidez. He's just like, nope. I might go to sleep, but I am doing everything I can for as long as I can to escape this. And then, like, getting pissed and trying to crush Brian Ortega's head through the canvas both times after escaping. You know, like, Josh Emmett landed some shots on Yair, but he was cowed and he got broken. And I don't think you can really break Volkanovski without absolutely physically compromising him. To the point where he
although I just wanted to say, yeah, that is the one other thing, which is obviously you have to account for, is that Volkanovski, as far as, like, all-time great UFC champions go, he's not the most durable. We've never seen him knocked out, but we have seen him. He's not Max Holloway, and he's not John Jones, and he's not one of these guys where you're like, I've never seen this person really badly.
He's not Yair. I mean...
He's not Yair, for that matter.
Yeah. Yair got hurt, in air quotes, by Josh Emmett. He got stunned by a huge clean right hand by one of the biggest punchers in the division. Didn't go down. Didn't really need any time to recover. We have seen Volkanovski knocked down. We've seen him chinned by a few people. He recovers exceptionally well, and he is freakily calm and composed, even when things are going terribly wrong. But, yeah, he can get hurt, for sure.
I mean, that's basically it. You have to pick him. He's the better fighter. He's got several paths open to him, some of which seem like they'd be safer than others. He's much more adaptable. He's better strategically. He's better tactically. But he's not insulated in almost any of the ways that you would like him to be.
Right.
If you are picking him.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a scary ass fight.
Yeah, and even people who are, like, these days, just like nobody gets an easy fight with Yair.
Yeah, I mean, if you asked me who was, like, one person who I'd be very confident who would just crush Yair Rodriguez, I would have been like, it's Max Holloway. He would going to beat him easily.
Yeah.
He just didn't.
He didn't. It was a very hard fight. Now, personally, if you ask me who I'd be very confident to beat Yair, I would have a simple answer. It would be Alex Pereira. But at featherweight, yeah, I mean, nobody gets an easy night with Yair Rodriguez. So it's somehow, despite all that Volkanovski has accomplished, and the fact that he literally dominated Max Holloway in his last fight with him, it still feels like a very a hairy matchup. So we'll see. It should be great to watch. Nothing better than seeing Volkanovski tested like that and getting to watch him not only come in with a great strategy, but come up with additional brilliant answers as the fight goes on. I can't wait to see it. All right, let's take a break then. When we come back, another title fight in the cards. Brandon Moreno versus Alexandre Pantoja 2 asterisk after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands. Here we go. The flyweight title is also on the line in the co-main event of UFC 290. Brandon Moreno defends his belt against Alexandre Pantoja, the man who has officially beaten him once before, unofficially beaten him twice before. A very interesting matchup, a test for our old theory that style matchups don't change. Because this is another one where Moreno is in many ways a very different fighter from the last times that he fought Pantoja. And the question is he different enough? How different is he? Can Pantoja bring that old dynamic back out of him no matter what he's bolted on top of it? The guy's beaten him twice before. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah. It's going to be a banger. I don't think these guys are really super capable of having boring fights.
No.
And especially not with each other.
No.
As to, can Pantoja replicate their previous fights? I mean, it's really hard to look at someone who's 2-0 against their opponent and then be like, oh yeah, he's not going to be able to do that again at all. Because, he's done it twice, and this isn't even, Pereira against Adesanya kind of stuff where you're like, oh yeah, he won the moments, but he lost sort of the minutes.
Right.
These were fights where Pantoja won pretty handily both times. But still, I'm probably still going to do it. He's still going to do it. Because Moreno is really one of those fighters where look at who he was earlier on in his UFC career. It genuinely doesn't look all that much like the person that we see today.
No.
He is the rare example of someone where you can see that sort of the very faintest sketch of how he wanted to fight was the same. Mm-hmm. He wanted to be a long rangy striker with a scramble centric and body lock takedown game. But other than that, the way that it's all put together and just the idea of how he was going to do it looks very, very different. He's a genuinely good boxer now, and I don't think he really was in either of their fights.
Yeah, let's put it this way. The last 2 times that he fought Pantoja, the last time he fought him, he didn't have a jab. Brandon Moreno did not have a jab. His range striking, I agree. He wanted to do the stuff he's doing now. It's probably why, when he finally learned those basic techniques, he took such a leap. Because it was this has been his dream the whole time, and now you just get to see him gleefully living it. What he was doing before was what in the board games world, Phil, might be called hope chess. You familiar with this concept?
So, I assume you just do stuff in the...
Yeah, I hope my opponent lets me do it.
Yeah.
Not taking into account like that they might have a good answer for the idea. And you can see that in his last fight with Pantoja, that he's like, I'm going to do this wild spinning technique. I'm going to feint and throw this counter combo. And like Pantoja was just able to smash through and punish him in any number of ways for all of these exotic ideas because he didn't have a jab. You can't fight at range if you don't have a jab. You just can't. Like, you have to be able to stick people. It enforces your stance. It prevents people from outmaneuvering you and from crashing in on you. It sets everything up like you need it. And he has it now. In fact, he has a very good one. And it means that, yeah, all of these, his crazier ideas are all actually built on some kind of foundation. They come with an initiative that demands a certain response from the opponent so that you don't just have to hope they don't come up with an answer. You force them to have to come up with an answer because you're testing them from the outset. So it is a massive, massive transformation for Moreno. But that's why I say it's a big test of the style matchups theory. Because for all the value Moreno has gotten out of that jab, I think he is still sort of essentially a wild man. And he hasn't exactly like impressed me across the board in all of his recent fights. Sometimes he is still out there kind of... I think he's capable of fighting down to the level of his competition. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't think he looked particularly good against Kai Kara-France. I think we agreed on that at the time. I thought he was in there just sort of making some questionable decisions. He wasn't using his jab as much as he should have. He still has a tendency to kind of fixate on like a favorite idea. Like, ooh, I'm going to land this cool counter right hand and try to sort of manufacture the exchanges that allow him to do the thing he wants rather than just, he's not Volkanovski. He doesn't just patiently build from the very beginning of the fight. Not all the time.
Yeah, I think he often gets, basically gets a bit lost as to how good he thinks he is.
Yes.
Like I said, he's a genuinely good boxer. I mean, that comes with obviously, caveats. He's one who maximizes his frame for his division. He does have like a very good, very effective jab. He's got a nice left hook. His right hand is often one of the most heinous punches you will see someone throw. But it is like Junior Dos Santos's back when he was still, not physically and mentally shot. In that most of the time when he's throwing it, he has a good, there's at least application for how he wants it to land.
Yeah.
But he's sort of 2/3 of a good boxer, and sometimes thinks that he's like 1.5 good boxers.
Yeah, he thinks he's fucking Pernell Whitaker half the time. And
yeah, I mean, the other thing I was thinking about their first UFC fight is that there were two real issues with that fight. In that the first was, as you said, it was that Moreno is just a much less fluid range striker in terms of dictating with his jab. Just like in counterpunching in general, he's just worse across the board. So that was sort of the problem with initiating exchanges. But also, I think he was much worse at sort of closing exchanges as well. Because so much of Pantoja's approach in that game was to just punch into the clinch, and then Moreno would just kind of panic and try and back out.
Yeah.
And Pantoja would club him or try and grab a body lock. And yeah, he was just able to kind of punch his way in, and Moreno did not know how to exit exchanges. Again, I just don't think that's true anymore, at least to the same extent. He will occasionally, just try and yank himself back out of clinch exchanges and scuttle away, but like a lot of his improvements against Figueiredo over the course of their fights was him kind of closing clinch exchanges, like looking on the exit, throwing elbows, just like his work in the pocket in general, lowering his level and going to the body, throwing combinations and so on. Like, that shit just wasn't there. Like, he just had this idea that he wanted to fight on the outside, but he didn't know how. And then once Pantoja was on the inside, you could just see him being like, what do I do here?
Yeah, nothing was connected except the fact that he threw a lot of combinations. Like one punch was connected to another, but there was no footwork sort of tying these things together. And I can't emphasize this enough, he literally did not have a jab. He would stick his left hand out. He would sort of paw and be like, okay, how close are you? But this was all in the service of then just sort of blundering forward, flailing with both hands. He was not able to stick Pantoja at range and actually open him up by force. He had to just, with subtle force. There was no, as you say, Phil, there was no wedge in his game to kind of create opportunities. He just had to smash into. This is exactly the wrong way to fight Pantoja. Because Pantoja is a smashing machine. Is that, whose nickname is that? Mark Kerr. That's right.
Mark Kerr, yeah.
Pantoja is a smashing machine. He is, before Figueiredo came along, I would have confidently called him the most physically imposing fighter at flyweight. He's super strong to the extent that he has never had to develop a particularly good wrestling game. He is frequently able to just smash into people and just yank them off their feet. He hits really hard. He's incredibly durable. And his game is kind of tailored around these physical traits. Like Pantoja, this was a huge problem for Moreno last time. He is a very good instinctive counterpuncher. I would not say that he's a good technical counterpuncher. He has, which isn't to say he doesn't have some ideas, but he's like Douglas De Silva. Yeah. Like you're not out there seeing like a sequence of 3 slips in a row. You're not seeing him like carefully feint and draw out the shot knowing how he's going to react. But when a shot comes at him, he either blocks it or gets hit by it and then surges back with good, accurate, powerful punches. He doesn't flinch when he gets hit. He is watching and ready to hit you back the moment you come into range, even if it means you hitting him first. And he's quite quick, too. So this was a huge problem because, as you said, Moreno had no idea how to exit. Pretty much every move he tried put him horribly out of position. And that meant that every time Pantoja threw back at him, there was an opportunity to land hard. And also to crash in and start out wrestling Brandon. And, you got to think those opportunities aren't going to be there in the same way. Maybe he can drag them out. I mean, this is the real style matchup dynamic that may not have changed. That it might be a lot harder. It could be like, here's a good example. It could be like Namajunas and Andrade 2.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a lot harder to get to that kind of wildness that favored Pantoja the last time around. There might be a much more layered range game to actually deal with, and maybe to enough that it will compromise him to the point that he can't actually win the fight at all, even when he does get to the kind of wild brawling exchanges and top positions that he wants. But I do have a feeling he'll probably still kind of get there at some point eventually, because he is going to offer Moreno a kind of fight that I think Moreno kind of likes. Like, Moreno is a proud fighter, and you offer him the prospect of a brawl. There is absolutely a part of Brandon Moreno's that's like, fuck you, I can beat you in a brawl. Okay, bring it on. And like Pantoja just gets that out of people. He just gets that out of pretty much everyone he fights. I'm really glad, by the way, before we move too far into this, just to see Pantoja getting a title shot.
Yeah, 100%. He's been reliably incredibly fun.
And he's been at the top of this division for years now.
Yeah, and he's just a guy who shows up and fights his ass off every single time, and exactly the kind of guy, and the kind of guy who takes whatever fights put in front of him. The classic, brave Brazilian who just never gets a title shot.
Yeah. So it's really good to see him.
They give him to every, because they make him have every hard fight he possibly can.
Right. I mean, let's not forget this is the first guy to actually have a competitive fight with Deiveson Figueiredo before Moreno kind of successfully figured him out. He still, he lost, but it was absolutely tooth and nail. He had a Figueiredo fight with Figueiredo and was competitive throughout. He's a beast. So, yeah, I'm very glad to see him getting this opportunity. I do think he'll probably get at least shades of their previous dynamic at some point in this fight. And I think it really, really depends on how disciplined Brandon is. As I said,
I think the other thing is that, Moreno has found himself being the person who can dictate the wrestling exchanges for a long time.
Yes.
I mean, Figueiredo was obviously the physically stronger fighter and so on, but Figueiredo broadly wasn't interested in doing the wrestle, which meant that, Moreno had relatively free reign to just try and do the smart MMA fighter thing and drop in takedowns to mix up his striking and all that other kind of stuff. Pantoja is going to be the first person that he's fought in a while who is going to be actively looking to out-wrestle him, a lot.
Yeah.
Basically, the first person since... I mean, you could say, I guess, Formiga, but...
Yeah,
he was very
not
old.
really a realistic possibility at that point.
Yes. Very old and very small.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, and you have to go back to his draw with Askar Askarov.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's another part of, Pantoja being able to force the old Moreno out of him is just, body locking him and throwing him onto the floor. I still don't, I think Moreno's takedown defense is better, but I don't think it's that much better.
No, and Pantoja is, again, not a super nuanced wrestler, but he is a very nuanced grappler. And to the point that he does not need to actually complete a takedown to get to a good position. Pantoja is one of these fighters who will very happily backpack somebody from a standing position. Or will just get to a rear waist cinch and just sort of broomstick you down to your butt and then jump on your back from there. This does not need to have a technically perfect double leg or outside trip or something to get to those good positions. He will sort of just find his way to a grappling position by forcing you to kind of muddle your way through wrestling defense. And, that's a real concern as well. Especially given that Brandon, he had that draw with Askar Askarov. He really struggled with the wrestling at certain points. And you want to look at both guys' fights with Brandon Royval. Super impressive how Moreno dealt with him. Pantoja basically beat him the same way. It was perhaps a more chaotic fight in Pantoja's case, because Pantoja has no way of keeping chaos out of the equation, as Moreno has learned to do. But he still ended up just sort of breaking Royval in the scrambles and ultimately getting on his back and quickly submitting him. So, and that's exactly where he beat Moreno in their previous fights. He certainly, we talked a lot about the striking deficiencies and how he was able to sort of just draw Moreno into a completely stupid brawl, but he also just outpositioned him on the ground in both of their fights. So I don't know. I think this is sort of in parallel to the main event, a fight where it feels like you have to pick Moreno, but there's even more reason to think here that you just can't write Pantoja off in this matchup. I mean, he has literally beaten him twice before. So, and
again, it's one of those fights where you're just I don't see how Moreno insulates himself from what Pantoja does.
I mean, I do. That's the thing, is if I trusted Moreno to be more like Volkanovski, you know what I mean? Like, the main event, it's less a question about Volkanovski. I'm sure he's going to come up with some good answers than it is about how dangerous his opponent is. Here, the opponent is undeniably dangerous, but I think there are ways for Moreno to kind of win more cleanly. I mean, I think if he is really, really dedicated to circling Pantoja, whose footwork is not great, if he's really dedicated to just out-angling him, sticking and moving, he can really break him down pretty patiently. And just keep him out of exchanges. Like, Pantoja is an instinctive counterpuncher. He's a brawler. He's a bruiser. He crashes forward in straight lines. He usually gets hit before he comes back with his counters. He doesn't have clean entries to his sloppy takedowns. He just smashes forward into people. And you can absolutely ding him first and then just sidestep him and rinse and repeat. That's a viable way to beat him. Of which I think Moreno is capable, but how much do I trust him to stick to his guns and really just methodically beat Pantoja? That is the question.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think he's going to do that. I think we're in for a pretty wild fight. I mean, but one where I just do trust Moreno more. I think at this point, just has more depth to his game.
Yeah.
Can dictate from the outside. He probably can close exchanges and counterpunch against Pantoja once Pantoja is on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
I trust him to be able to scramble with Pantoja more should he get body locked and taken down. Might have some scary moments, but honestly, I mean, he's just a really good grappler at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's just bigger and longer, and I just expect him to win a tough, scrappy fight. I think he probably starts off winning, and then Pantoja works his way back in again, and then Moreno probably finishes up winning as well.
Yeah, that sounds realistic.
Just because, again, he just has more things to go to nowadays. As you know, he's an okay kicker, as Kai Kara France found out. Pantoja's still mostly a boxer. He's much more of an offensive wrestler than he used to be. I mean, I think he just has more depth to go to, and we've seen him in brutally tough fights with Figueiredo.
Yeah.
Where he's shown, if nothing else, that he can actually be pretty good at winning rematches.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really, really showed an ability to adapt and come up with fresh game plans. Yeah. Just like the main event, you got to pick the champion to retain. But I don't know, man. I need to see Moreno fight smart here. I think he can win even if he doesn't. But like that is how he lost the last two fights. He did not fight smart. The only difference now is he didn't know how to fight smart then. Now he does. I would love to see this. I feel like it would be a huge point of pride for Moreno to just go out there and sort of dominate Pantoja after the way their previous two fights have gone. And in fact, I mean, maybe he will because of that. Maybe he will come in looking to be super disciplined and just try to box Pantoja out of the pocket for as much of the fight as he can. But a lot of it will depend on. I'm gonna base how I think this fight will go live based on how Moreno is holding himself when the fight begins. If he comes
does he look like he's going to try and throw his right hand?
If he comes out and he's like, he's got that weird, like slightly low guard and his chin is super high and he's just like flexing on Pantoja just with his posture. I mean, I think he might, I think he might be stupid here and make this a lot closer than I think it really needs to be. But yeah, if he shows up disciplined, I think he can jab Pantoja. I think he can kick him from range. I think he can outmaneuver him and just sort of draw out his big wild swings and play Matador. I think that is very realistic.
Yeah. Again, I don't trust him to do it, but I think he probably wins regardless.
Yeah, we will see. We will see. And I think that's a good time to take another break. When we come back, we have middleweights on the docket. Robert Whittaker versus Dricus du Plessis. I don't know what the fuck we're going to say about this fight, but I'm looking forward to trying to find it. We will do that right after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
God, what fight should I even queue up? I'm going to queue
Does
up.
it matter?
What's that?
Does it matter?
Or whatever. We're going. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. Bobby Knuckles, Dricus du Plessis. What the hell? What the hell, Phil? Dricus du Plessis is fighting for contention. He is fighting a perennial number one contender in this division in Bobby Knuckles, the guy who would definitely probably still be champion if Israel Adesanya did not exist. And now the messiest, weirdest, most beat-faced fighter in the sport is getting an opportunity to wrest that slot away from him. Dricus du Plessis, what can you say? What can you say?
I mean, he's the most successful, like, not very good-looking fighter that we've... Trying to think of a nicer way of saying this.
He's the best bad fighter in the sport right now.
He is, yeah. He's kind of the Derek Lewis of the middleweight division. Just, without Derek Lewis's incredible power, just with the ability to have people that he fights be old and explode.
Yeah, that's certainly part of it. We cannot ignore the fact that all of du Plessis' success is sort of matchup dependent. I mean, the problem is you get a lot of these opportunities to rise like this at middleweight.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to fight old guys who are too crafty to have gone away, like Derek Brunson and Brad Tavares, and you're going to fight extremely specifically limited fighters like Darren Till. But it's just the fact the way Dricus has been beating these dudes. Like, it's both a knock on him and a mark of distinction, because the fights have been so stupid that you cannot describe them. Like, you just have to watch in all. The decision making is terrible. The technique is awful. He gets tired in 3 minutes, but somehow not enough to not sort of stick around and then recover. He gets hit clean. He gets taken down. He goes for takedowns and gets comically reversed. He looks bad. And yet he looks terrible. And he just keeps winning. He just refuses to lose. I mean, if nothing else, he has that championship mentality that we talked about. But to compare him to a guy like Alexander Volkanovski in any other way is a huge insult to Volkanovski and the entire nation of New Zealand, as well as Greece and Macedonia, while we're on that subject. I mean, it's a huge insult to hundreds of thousands of people to say that Dricus du Plessis is like Volkanovski. But he does have that. He refuses to lose. And it counts, man. I swear he has won all of these fights on willpower more than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that is true. And you just have to ask yourself, like, is willpower enough? I mean, the other thing is, like, that he spoke, I think it was his trainer who was like, Dricus du Plessis was only getting 8% oxygen, and now he's had nose surgery. And you're like, so you're telling me he's going to be he's going to be what?
Yeah.
12 and a half times more oxygenated?
It's like that. First of all, that is definitely some bro science. He's getting 8%. What does that mean?
I know, he would be dead. He would be dead.
That's a made-up number.
That's like, yes.
This also sounds like that, what's that Scarlett Johansson movie where she's only using 10% of her brain? Lucy.
Yeah, Lucy, that film rules.
Suddenly, oh my god, imagine Dricus du Plessis with 100% oxygenated blood.
Also, like, the thing that I find funny about this is that, like, was that the problem with Dricus du Plessis? People looking at this guy being like, man, he'd be so great if if it was Zabit, it would be like, oh, sure, yeah, maybe that'll make a difference. He'll be, he'll have a great gas tank now. No, the problem is that he sucks. It's not that he's struggling to get oxygen.
He's a fucking
People
mess.
kick the shit out of him, and then he actually has more gas tank than them.
Yeah, and, if anything,
comes back because they're old and rubbish.
If anything, given not only how much punishment he takes, but how incredibly inefficient his technique is, and how just nakedly unsustainable the pace he wants to fight at is, he has impressed with his stamina.
Yeah, that's the thing. The upgrade that the only upgrade that we could feasibly be looking at here for Dricus du Plessis is that he comes out fighting more insane and doing it for longer.
Hey, maybe that'll work. Yeah.
I mean, again, that they should be focusing more on that as like a selling point.
Yeah.
You think he's been doing dumb stuff at the beginning of his fights? Look at us doing 4 times more dumb stuff. No much. It's not going to be any better executed. He's still going to be getting counterpunched to death. He's not going to be able to wrestle, but goddamn, he's going to be trying harder than anyone you've ever seen in your life.
He's now so oxygenated that he's in danger near any open flames. He's not allowed to. He's not allowed to operate the light switch in the locker room for fear of igniting. That's how oxygenated du Plessis is now. Yeah, that's some definite bro science. It doesn't make any sense to me. I suspect it's complete hokum. Which isn't to say that having corrective nose surgery isn't a good idea. A lot of fighters do deal with that. A lot of fighters will just go through the entire back half of their careers with one working nostril because you get deviated septums, you get your nose broken. I mean, that happens. Anyway, setting that all aside, I mean, Robert should be able to jab him to pieces, right?
He should. I mean, he should be able. Let's be honest. He should be able to do whatever he wants.
Yeah, he should be able to out wrestle him if he wants to win that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Dricus' game just doesn't make any sense, and he may not have the power of Jared Cannonier, but you can't ignore the fact that Bobby Knuckles had a masterclass performance against Jared Cannonier and still almost kind of got KO'd at the very end.
Yeah, du Plessis doesn't have the power, the durability, size, or the technique of Jared Cannonier.
But he is significantly crazier.
He's crazy in a different way. He's crazy in a way that he has to be because if he doesn't have anything else to fall back on.
Yeah, if he was sane, he would have retired 4 years ago. He'd be like, I'm not going to get good at this. No, but he is insane. And he can, I have a feeling he will, despite being even more hittable, will be harder to box out of exchanges than a guy like Kelvin Gastelum. Because he just isn't going to listen. He's just going to surge in and just try to swing back. And I mean, you want to look at his fight with Derek Brunson and say that he out Derek. And truly if people listening have not watched that fight, or if you haven't watched it recently, just go watch all of Dricus' UFC fights. They are absolutely bonkers. But Derek Brunson, yes, he got his clock cleaned by Robert Whittaker. He also made him profoundly uncomfortable for the 3.5 minutes before Whittaker slept him with one perfect shot, or started the finishing sequence with that one perfect counter. There is the opportunity to just make this fight so crazy that chances materialize. And it's the only way, really, I can see Dricus having any shot. Because otherwise, he's just too bad at everything.
Mm-hmm.
He is a sieve defensively. His punches are all way too overthrown and really like jankily connected. Like, this is a guy who MMA fighters are prone to throwing every combo as like a shift, just trying to fly forward. Dricus cannot punch without shifting. He has no notion of how to keep his stance when he throws a punch. And like, he doesn't feint. He's not subtle. Like, the only thing that sets anything up for Dricus is that you've kind of put yourself out of position trying to avoid the previous stupid thing that he did. He just has to fling the kitchen sink at people. And if he can't do that sustainably, he just gets tuned up, right?
Yeah. I mean, he's just not good.
He's not good.
There's sort of, back in the day in middleweight, there used to be the archetypes of, the BJJ guy with suspect gas tank and the sort of generic kickboxers and so on. And nowadays there seem to be like two major archetypes of like single shot at a time kickboxer who expects you to be finished. Mm-hmm. And there's a guy who does a lot of things and just doesn't get particularly tired and just keeps doing a lot of things. And Dricus is just one of these guys. He's like, Strickland to some extent is one of those guys. Vittori is one of those guys. They are both clearly better than Dricus du Plessis. Fluffy Hernandez is one of those guys. Of all the people who Dricus du Plessis has beaten, would you expect how would you expect Fluffy Hernandez to do against any of them?
Yeah, he'd beat them all.
Yeah,
100%. And Robert Whittaker would beat Fluffy Hernandez.
Yeah, he would thrash him.
Yeah,
because Fluffy Hernandez is actually like kind of good in some ways.
Certainly with his wrestling and grappling, he's leagues above Dricus.
I mean, pretty much with everything apart from just silliness
and racism.
Silliness
and racism. He's not as good at that as Dricus.
Yes. Oh my God! Looking at the end of round 2 of Du Plessis Brunson.
I know. And I'm literally watching the same thing. What time are you at? I'm at 1:14.
Literally, like the last few seconds when he's almost too tired to ground and pound him. Like, you see him like really has to think about whether it's worth like throwing this last punch.
Yeah.
Pretty much as Brunson's corner throws the towel in.
Man.
Yeah, dreadful. There's no reason to assume he can beat Robert Whittaker unless Robert Whittaker is suddenly incredibly shot overnight.
Yeah.
The most you should hope for is that really it is going to be funny, that it will be like Whittaker, like Brunson, that he'll get a funny KO where Du Plessis just can't stop running forward into stuff and just gets absolutely torched.
I mean, I can't. This can't be overstated. When Dricus du Plessis only beat Darren Till by out wrestling him, and this is not because he's a good wrestler. The takedowns in that fight are comical because Darren doesn't know how to stop takedowns. Like, I don't know how it took so long for that to be exposed. But certainly since the Tyron Woodley fight, like, everyone should have just been out there just trying a takedown whenever against Darren, because he literally like doesn't sprawl. He doesn't know how to stop a takedown. His feet stay there, and he's like, maybe I'll do an underhook. And while he's thinking about that, he's falling over. That's how Dricus out wrestled him. When Darren, who by the way lost the entire first round just by getting pushed against the fence and punched 10,000 times without doing anything to get out, because he also doesn't know how to fight the hands, apparently. A baffling performance from Darren. And yet, when his corner yelled at him and he came back out in the second round, he started lighting Dricus up with straight punches. He started jabbing him to pieces. And, like, this was in the period where Dricus was trying to regain all the energy he had burned in round 1. he couldn't stop a single straight punch from landing clean. So Bobby Knuckles should be able to punch holes in him with his jabs. I mean, he should be able to win this fight with just his jab. As I said, he should be capable of out-wrestling Dricus to a win if that's how he wants to do it. Because Dricus isn't a good wrestler.
Yeah.
He's just big and strong and insane.
I mean, this is just one of those times when, like, a meme fighter puts together a few somewhat fortunate wins over old people and gets to fight someone actually good. You know, I mean, Kevin Holland, obviously, previous example, with, the exception being that, like, Kevin Holland is more skilled than Dricus du Plessis. Like, Evan, you can sometimes look at him and be, oh, that was nice. Because du Plessis has never done anything nice. He's never been, like, looked good in any phase of mixed martial arts. Like, Ryan Wagner, like, posted on Twitter, like, showing, like, Darren Till du Plessis, just a screenshot of it, of, like, du Plessis trying to take Till down, and it's like, choose your own adventure. Dricus du Plessis is just face planted trying to take you down. And it's just Till just vaguely trying to crawl away whilst du Plessis just holds onto his shin and buries his own face in the mat. Like, do you A, push the head and limp leg, B, try to like yank your leg away, or C, just kind of stand there doing nothing? The skill disparity in this fight is so massive. I don't think it would even be funny if du Plessis somehow won.
Yeah, and
it would just make me horrified.
True, this shouldn't be able to happen, and there's also the fact that like there shouldn't be any athletic disparity. Maybe durability. That Bobby can be hurt, and Dricus is somehow, despite every shot that hits him being as clean as it could possibly be, is not easy to hurt.
He's easy to hurt. He just keeps coming.
Yeah, it's hard to tell how often he's hurt and how often he's just gassed and off balance. Like his movement doesn't make sense to begin with. So I don't know, but the thing is like Volkanovski, Robert Whittaker is one of these guys who, despite being a great technician, is also a freakish athlete. So even that, there shouldn't be any kind of physical advantage of any kind for Dricus. So yeah. Easy pick. Bobby Knuckles all day. But boy, it's going to be fun to watch. This is one where it should be fun to watch even if one fighter is just cleanly winning the entire time. Because Dricus even takes punches hilariously. Like, everything he does is so incredibly comically entertaining.
Yeah, this man is like QWOP physics. Like, he's like everyone else is playing everyone else is playing like a fighting game character where you press the punches and the character will do a punch kind of thing. He is playing like he fights like someone is controlling him and they're controlling each individual limb.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
All over the place, but yeah, even if he's getting torched, I mean, there's a reason he was Laugh Out Loud Pure Entertainment Fighter of the Year 2022.
And I have to think he will continue to be. I don't know. I mean, we're going to have to consider the boy Trevor Peake in this year's Handies as well.
Oh, hell yes.
Who was also just amazingly entertaining in a very Dricus du Plessis kind of way. But yeah.
Also the other Usman brother.
Oh yeah.
Very impressed by that man.
Muhammad Usman.
Yeah. Muhammad Usman, yes.
Yeah. Is he actually related to Kamaru?
Is he? Or maybe he isn't, sorry.
Well, they have the same last name. I mean, it could be. I don't think so. I think maybe not. I don't know. Either way, yeah, Dricus, I think, will be in contention for Laugh Out Loud Pure Entertainment Fight of the Year for as long as he is competing. Like, he is just a lock to at least be in the top 3 of that Handies category. Dricus might be one of those few fighters that I like actively follow, even if and when he gets cut from the UFC, because he's amazing to watch. There's nobody else quite like him.
It is, apart from anything else, you're just like the sheer horrified fascination of how the fuck is this still working?
All right, well, it shouldn't work this time. That's our pick. Bobby Knuckles. I'm sure we have picked 3 favorites here, which means that we are almost certainly going to be wrong about at least one of them. If you had to pick, Phil, which one would you like emotionally like to be wrong about most? I think it would be the flyweight title fight.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Pantoja winning.
Yeah, Pantoja, he's earned that shot. If he won, it would be one of those like great underdog, just keeping at it kind of stories. He validates those wins that he's previously had, that kind of thing. I would be sort of horrified if either of the Australians lost. I'm not gonna lie,
especially Bobby Knuckles. If Dricus beats Bobby Knuckles, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. I just don't. I can't even imagine it.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, either one of them. I live in. I have cold sweats about like waking up the day after the fights and then logging into social media and just seeing like Rodriguez incredible KO like popping up before I have time to watch anything.
Right. Well, we shall see. 3 very exciting fights of 3 extremely different colors. Should be a fantastic end to this pay-per-view card. And that is, I hope, a fantastic end to this week's episode of Heavy Hands. Thank you all so much for listening. Find us on Twitter for as long as that site continues to exist. At Evil Greg Jackson, that's Phil. At Boxing Bush, that's me. Make sure you check out our Patreon. I think, Phil, you got a little more time here?
Yeah, I reckon so.
All right, we're going to do a little bonus content for you. Talk about Jalen Turner, Dan Hooker, Robbie Lawler, Nico Price, maybe a couple of these other undercard fights as well. You can find that at patreon.com/heavyhands. And we really appreciate your support. And until next week, when we come back to be horrified about at least one of the 3 fights we just discussed. If you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.